He was just a struggling single dad, finishing another long shift on a snowy night until he saw a luxury SUV stranded on the roadside. Inside, a woman lay unconscious, her pulse fading. He didn't know her name. He just knew he had to act. What happened next would change both of their lives forever. If you love heartwarming, inspirational stories that celebrate kindness, love, and second chances, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We've got so many beautiful stories waiting for you. Now let's begin this unforgettable journey. Struggling. Single dad gave CPR to a collapsed CEO. She fell for him the moment. She opened her eyes. The wind screamed down the Colorado highway like a ghost lost in the trees. Snowflakes hurled against the windshield of Jake Holloway's old Ford truck, the wipers thudding rhythmically in a losing battle. The heater was working overtime, but his fingers still ached from the cold. Jake squinted through the storm jaw tight, trying to stay awake after a long evening shift, hauling parts between body shops. In the back seat, a pink backpack lay on its side, half-zipped, with a crumpled permission slip sticking out. He'd promised Lila he'd sign it tonight. Science fair, Saturday. She wanted to build a model of the solar system using old spark plugs. He smiled faintly. That kid could make anything shine. As he rounded the bend, his headlights caught something blinking hazards. A black SUV sat at an odd angle on the snowy shoulder, its front tire partially buried in the drift. Instinct kicked in. Jake eased the truck to the side, grabbed his flashlight from the glove box, and stepped out into the cold. The wind bit through his jacket like a blade. He trudged toward the SUV, boots crunching in the snow, his breath fogging in front of him. Closer now, he saw the driver's door slightly ajar. The interior lights were on, casting a pale glow on the dashboard, and a woman slumped over the wheel. "Ma'am," he called out, knocking on the window. No response. "Hey, ma'am." He yanked open the door. The woman didn't stir. Blonde hair spilled over a camel-colored coat, face pale and lips slightly blue. Jake reached for her wrist, no pulse. A bolt of urgency shot through him. He set the flashlight in the snow, grabbed her shoulders, and pulled her gently out of the seat, laying her down on the snowbank, careful not to let her head thump. His mind raced. No cell service out here. Nearest help was miles away. He knelt beside her and started compressions, counting under his breath. 1, 2, 3. The snow fell heavier. His breath came in hard gasps. Every push into her chest felt like a battle against time itself. She was young, maybe mid-30s. Well-dressed, a silk blouse beneath her coat, gold watch still ticking faintly on her wrist. Her heels were buried in the snow. Whoever she was, she didn't belong on this road, not like this. Come on. Jake muttered, checking her airway, giving 2 breaths, going back to compressions. Minutes passed, how many he didn't know. Then a miracle. She gasped. It was faint at first, then more definite. Her eyes fluttered open wide and wild, like someone waking from a nightmare underwater. She tried to sit up, but collapsed again, groaning. Jake placed a hand on her shoulder. Easy. You passed out. You're okay now. Can you hear me?" Her gaze met his, and something in it stopped the world. Panic, confusion, then something else. Recognition. No, more like anchoring. As if she were lost and had just found a lighthouse in a stranger's eyes. Where?" she rasped. "You're okay. I think you fainted. I was driving by and saw your car." He grabbed his jacket from the truck and laid it over her. "You're safe now. I'm Jake." She nodded slowly, struggling to catch her breath. "Evelyn," she whispered, then hesitated. "Eva. Just Ava." Jake looked around. Still no signal. He helped her into the truck, cranked the heat, then drove slowly toward the urgent care clinic 10 miles down. The silence in the cab was deep and surreal. Evelyn Eva clutched his jacket like armor eyes, staring out the window, expression unreadable. She didn't ask questions, didn't talk. Jake respected that. Some silences were sacred. When they reached the clinic, the nurse rushed out, took over. Jake gave a brief explanation. "Found her unconscious by the road. No ID, says her name is Eva," then stepped back. "Sir, are you a relative?" the nurse asked. "No, just someone passing by." An hour later, after some warming fluids and basic tests, the nurse came back. "She's stable. Low blood pressure and dehydration. Might have been pushing herself too hard. She'll be fine." Jake exhaled, quietly relieved, but when he looked in on her, the bed was empty. Where, he asked. The nurse handed him something. She left this in your truck. Said she didn't want to cause trouble. It was a gold women's watch, small, elegant, engraved faintly on the inside, 2E. Love, always, Mom. Jake stood there holding it in the flickering hallway, light heart thudding. She was gone. No full name, no contact. Just a name that probably wasn't real, and a moment that felt more real than anything had in years. Back in the truck, he sat behind the wheel watch, still in hand, snow tapping lightly against the windshield. He could have just driven away, let it go. But something inside him knew better. People didn't just fall into your life like that for no reason. And some names, real or not, had a way of coming back, especially when you save someone's life, and they look at you like you just saved their soul. Jake Holloway had seen a lot in his 42 years, blown engines, busted knees, broken promises, but he'd never seen anything like the night before. Now, as the morning sun pushed through the clouds, melting yesterday's snow into slush along the sidewalks of Maple Ridge, Jake stood at his kitchen sink, the gold watch resting on the counter beside his coffee mug. Its face gleamed in the soft light. He hadn't slept much, just lay there hearing her gasp replay over and over her breath, returning like a second chance dragged back from the edge. Eva. He said it aloud once, as if the name might become real if he gave it voice. It didn't. It just hung there, hollow and half true. Lila shuffled in her oversized pajama shirt, dragging just above her knees. Her hair looked like a bird's nest, and her glasses were fogged up from sleep. "Did you sign my permission slip?" she mumbled, voice scratchy. Jake smiled faintly and handed it to her from the kitchen table. Signed, sealed, ready for science glory. She grinned, suddenly awake. "Awesome, Mrs. Camden says I can use real spark plugs if I wear gloves. You got any dead ones? I got a whole drawer of them in the shop. We'll turn Saturn into a V8 masterpiece." Lila blinked at the watch. "Whose is that?" Jake hesitated. "A lady I helped last night. She leave it." He nodded. Lila picked it up with a kind of reverence only children have for shiny things. "It's so pretty. Looks expensive." Jake took it from her gently. "It is. Which makes me think she didn't forget it." "Then why'd she give it to you?" Jake didn't answer right away. "Maybe she wanted to say thank you in her own way. But you don't even know her name." "Not really." Lila frowned, serious now. "Are you going to find her?" Jake looked at the watch again, then out the window, where the snow was slowly giving way to mud and early spring. "If it's meant to happen, it'll happen." He didn't say it out loud, but deep down, he wanted to believe that kindness, real, unforced, inconvenient kindness, had a way of circling back. By mid-afternoon, Jake had returned to the garage behind his house. The bay door creaked as he rolled it up, revealing a beat-up Chevy on blocks, an old Craftsman tool chest, and rows of shelves stacked with salvaged parts. It wasn't fancy, but it was his. He placed the watch carefully in a small velvet pouch and tucked it into the top drawer of his toolbox, beside an old photo of Lila as a toddler and a rusted bolt from the first car he ever rebuilt with his father. It belonged there for now. The days that followed were ordinary in the way that made them good. Jake juggled his delivery jobs, fixed up a neighbor's snowmobile, and made Lila grilled cheese sandwiches in the shape of stars. But every so often, he'd find his mind drifting back to the woman with the haunted eyes and the silk blouse buried in snow. Then, on the fifth day, something strange happened. A silver SUV pulled into his driveway just after lunch. Not the same one from that night, this one was newer, sleeker. From the driver's side stepped a woman in dark jeans and a navy wool coat, sunglasses, covering half her face. Jake wiped his hands on a rag, stepping out of the garage. "Can I help you?" "I hope so," the woman said. Her voice was lower than he remembered, steadier. "I heard you do restoration work on garages." Jake squinted. The voice was familiar, but the name she'd given Eva wasn't offered this time, and her posture was different, less fragile, more guarded. "I do small jobs," Jake said cautiously. "Mostly repairs." "You local?" "Not exactly, but I inherited a property from my mother nearby. It's been empty for years. I'd like to fix it up. Thought I'd start with the garage." Jake nodded, trying not to look like he was staring. "What kind of work are you thinking?" "Nothing fancy. Roof's leaking. Door doesn't close right. Probably some rot in the siding. I'll pay fair in cash. Just want it clean usable. Sentimental reasons. Jake paused. Something about her felt familiar, and yet new. She wasn't pretending not to know him, but she wasn't acknowledging the connection either. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. Then Eva. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Just Eva." Her lips curved just slightly. "For now." There was a silence, but not a cold one. It lingered like snow that refused to melt. By the time Jake followed her to the property, a modest cottage tucked behind a windbreak of pines, he was already hooked, though he wouldn't have admitted it. Not to her, not even to himself. The garage was old, all right. Peeling paint, warped frame vines creeping up the siding like forgotten memories. Jake whistled low. "This place hasn't seen a socket wrench since the Reagan administration." She laughed softly, and that sound light unguarded touched something inside him. "I'll need a few weeks," he said. "Not just patchwork. If you want it done right, it'll take time." "I have time," she replied, "and I trust you." Jake's eyes narrowed. "You don't know me." Her expression grew distant. "Maybe I do." He opened his mouth to speak, but she was already turning toward the house. "I'll leave you to it then." Jake watched her disappear through the back door, then looked again at the garage. The job was real, but it was something else too. He didn't know what game she was playing. Maybe she was just grateful. Maybe she was lonely. Or maybe she was running from something no one else could see. Whatever it was, Jake wasn't sure if he should run toward it or away from it. But one thing was certain: she'd come back, not by accident, and she wasn't done with him yet. And maybe he wasn't done with her either. Jake wasn't one to let a woman get under his skin, not since Allison died. Life had trained him to keep his heart locked behind bolts and gears, just like the engines he repaired. But Ava, whoever she really was, had a way of walking past walls without asking permission. She didn't pry, she didn't boast. And that made her harder to read than a wiring diagram on a 1972 Cadillac. The garage she'd hired him to fix sat behind an old cottage with flaking shutters and ivy-choked gutters. It was the kind of place that had been loved once, maybe even mourned. Now it waited in silence for someone to breathe life back into its bones. Jake had started with the roof torn out, shingles, warped beams. Each morning Eva appeared with a thermos of coffee, 2 mugs, and a calm presence that said nothing but somehow filled the air. By the 3rd day, it had become a ritual. She'd lean against the porch railing while he worked. Lila, out of school early that week due to parent-teacher conferences, sometimes joined them crouched nearby with a sketch pad and crayons. She liked to draw the garage in phases before, during, and hopefully after. Eva, for her part, asked questions about things no client usually cared about: why Jake chose certain nails, what kind of wood would hold up best in Colorado's dry winters, how long it took for an oil stain to soak through concrete. She listened, not like a client, not like a boss, but like someone who genuinely wanted to understand. One afternoon, as Jake nailed down the final row of shingles, Eva emerged from the cottage carrying a tray of sandwiches. "Turkey and cheddar," she said. "No mayo. You strike me as a no mayo kind of guy." Jake looked down at his tar-smeared gloves. "You're not wrong." He climbed down from the ladder, accepted the sandwich with a nod. Lila was already munching away, feet dangling from the tailgate of his truck. "You cook?" Jake asked, taking a bite. Eva smiled, faint but warm. "I reheat well." They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that wasn't loud but lingered after it faded. "Why the garage?" Jake asked finally. "You could have hired anyone. Bigger company, cheaper probably." Eva was silent for a moment, eyes following a red bird darting across the trees. "My mother used to keep all my father's tools in there," she said softly. After he passed, she'd sit in that garage some evenings and just listen. To the wind, to the house, settling to the silence. It was her way of staying close to him. Jake set down his sandwich, brushing crumbs from his jeans. "So why now? Why fix it after all these years?" Eva looked at him then, really looked. "Because someone reminded me that the past doesn't fix itself. You have to choose to repair it." Jake didn't know what to say to that. He didn't know who she really was, or what kind of life she'd lived before their paths crossed on a snowy night. But he knew the look in her eyes. It was the same look he saw in his mirror after Allison died. The next morning, Jake arrived to find Eva and Lila sitting on the porch steps, laughing over a comic book. The scene stopped him cold, like something out of a painting he didn't realize had been missing from his life. "Dad," Lila called. "Eva says I can paint the garage door when you're done. Can I please?" Jake blinked. "Paint it?" Eva raised her hands innocently. "Just a little mural, something cheerful." Jake tried to play the gruff card, but Lila's hopeful grin made it impossible. "Fine," he said, sighing with mock defeat. But no glitter. Lila squealed and hugged Eva. "You're the best." Eva looked surprised, touched even, as if the hug had reached someplace deeper than she expected. Jake watched it unfold from the ladder, something swelling in his chest. He hadn't felt in a long time the early murmur of belonging. Later that day, Jake was replacing the warped trim along the garage's foundation when Eva approached with a roll of painter's tape and a small plastic tub. "I picked up primer and outdoor paint," she said. "Soft green, like pine needles in spring." "You don't waste time," he said, raising a brow. "I like getting things done. That's not a crime, is it?" "No," he said then after a pause. "It's familiar." They stood there for a moment, the breeze catching Eva's hair, the sound of Lila humming nearby. Jake glanced sideways. "You're not from around here. That obvious." Eva's smile faltered slightly. "I was. Once. A long time ago. And now," she looked out toward the mountains. "Now I'm not sure where I belong." Jake leaned on his hammer. "You and me both." As dusk rolled in and Jake packed up his tools, Eva handed him a manila envelope. "What's this payment for the first week, with a little extra for Lila's mural paints?" Jake opened it, blinked. It was more than generous. "You don't have to tip me like that." "I'm not tipping you," she said gently. "I'm investing in something good." Jake stared at her, words caught somewhere between his chest and his throat. He wanted to ask her so many things, why she was really here, what she was running from, whether she remembered the night he saved her life. But instead he nodded. "See you tomorrow." Eva's gaze softened. "I'd like that." As he drove home, Lila dozing in the seat beside him, Jake glanced once at the rearview mirror. The cottage behind him was still and quiet, but something told him this story was just getting started. Not because of the job, not because of the money, but because somewhere in the silence of a broken garage, two people had started to repair something neither of them had words for yet. Something that just maybe could still be called hope. The week passed in layers, like the coats of primer. Jake was laying on the garage walls. Quiet, consistent, deliberate. Morning frost gave way to mild afternoons, and with each passing day, Jake found his guard easing in ways that startled him. Eva never asked too much and never said too little. She brought coffee each morning in mismatched mugs from the cottage's dusty kitchen, and sometimes stayed late into the afternoon, helping him lift lumber or hold a ladder, steady, unbothered by splinters or smudges of dirt on her jeans. Jake tried not to notice how naturally she moved through the space, how her presence began to feel expected, like the creak of the old door or the smell of pine sawdust. But it wasn't just him. Lila had grown attached too. The child who once tiptoed cautiously around new people now reached for Eva's hand, without hesitation, tugging her toward crayon drawings or reading aloud from dog-eared library books. One afternoon, as Jake adjusted a new window frame, he heard the laughter. Real, unfiltered musical laughter Eva's. He looked over and saw Lila perched on a paint can, holding up a lopsided drawing of a bear driving a convertible through outer space. Eva was doubled over with laughter tears, forming in the corners of her eyes. "She says it's called Galaxy Bear," Lila announced proudly. Jake chuckled despite himself. "I don't know whether to be impressed or concerned." "You should be both," Eva said, wiping her eyes, still grinning. "She's got an imagination like a wildfire." Jake nodded. Gets that from her mother. The moment hung between them like mist. Eva didn't pry. Instead, she sat down beside Lila and asked, "What's the bear's next adventure?" And just like that, the weight dissolved. That evening, Jake stayed late to finish the trim on the south wall. Eva lingered, sipping her coffee, arms crossed as the sun dipped behind the ridge. He could feel her watching him. "You know," she said quietly, "you work like someone who doesn't like to stop." Jake didn't look at her, Idle hands make noisy thoughts. She stepped closer, her boots crunching the gravel. You ever let yourself rest? He finally met her gaze. I rest when there's nothing left to fix. Eva's eyes softened. But sometimes, fixing isn't your job. Jake lowered his hammer, slowly setting it down. That right, she nodded. Sometimes things need time, not tools. For a moment, they just stood there facing each other in the amber light. Jake exhaled. You talk like someone who's been through something. I have, she said, and I don't always know what to do with it. But this place, you and Lila, it's helping. Jake looked away, his throat tight. It's not much. It's more than you think. The next day was Saturday, and Lila insisted it was mural day. Jake had picked up a few cans of outdoor paint from the hardware store, soft greens, deep blues, a pop of bright yellow. Eva arrived, wearing an old sweatshirt with the sleeves rolled up and paint already smudged on her cheek. I got ambitious, she admitted, grinning, tested the brushes on the cottage steps. Jake squinted at the colorful swirl of leaves and stars across her sleeve. Looks like the universe sneezed on you. Thank you, she replied with a mock bow. High praise. Together they mapped out the garage door mural, Lila sketching Eva, filling in outlines, and Jake pretending not to enjoy any of it as he supervised from a folding chair. The mural came to life with surprising speed, a tree in the center with its roots wrapping down toward the foundation branches, reaching toward the sky. Each branch held something personal, a wrench, a book, a toy rocket, a sunflower. Tiny details that Lila insisted mattered. When they paused for lunch, Jake brought out sandwiches and sat with Eva beneath the half-finished artwork. You ever paint before, he asked. Not since I was a kid, she said. My mother painted, not professionally, but with passion. Every wall in our house had a story on it. Jake nodded, watching her eyes drift toward the horizon. She died in this house, didn't she? He asked. Eva looked down at her hands. She did, 2 winters ago. I couldn't make it in time. I'm sorry. She'd been sick for a while. I told myself I was too busy, too many deadlines. And by the time I cleared the calendar, her voice cracked. The silence was louder than anything I'd ever known. Jake let the silence settle. He knew that kind of guilt, the kind that curled up in the corners of your soul and refused to leave. My wife died in a hospital bed, he said finally. Brain aneurysm. 1 minute she was holding Lila's hand, and the next, he shook his head. I couldn't fix it, and I fix everything. Eva looked at him, eyes shimmering. Maybe some things aren't meant to be fixed. Maybe they're meant to be carried. Jake nodded slowly. Maybe. For a while they just sat there side by side, neither trying to outcomfort the other, and somehow that made it healing. That evening, after Lila fell asleep in the truck on the way home, Jake carried her to bed and returned to the living room, sitting alone in the quiet. He glanced over at the velvet pouch in the drawer, the one that held the gold watch Eva had left behind that first night. He hadn't returned it. Something told him not to rush that. Instead, he picked up the drawing Lila had left on the table, the mural plan color-coded with scribbled notes. In the center of the tree, Lila had drawn a heart. Inside it, 3 initials L-J-E. Jake smiled faintly, the warmth of it settling into his chest like a fire long unlit. He didn't know where this thing with Eva was going, didn't even know who she really was, not yet. But he knew how it felt, like something worth rebuilding. And for the first time in years, Jake Holloway dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, something good was coming back to life. The mural was nearly complete by Tuesday. It stood like a declaration on the side of the once-forgotten garage, bright, bold, and entirely alive. The tree's branches now carried new additions. Lila had painted a tiny bird's nest tucked among the leaves, and Eva had carefully added a set of initials, hidden in the roots ones she didn't explain. Jake didn't ask. He didn't need to. Some things were sacred. That morning, he was setting new hinges on the garage door when Lila came bounding down the gravel path from the cottage, clutching a newspaper she'd picked up from the corner store with Eva. Dad, you gotta see this, she shouted, winded from running. It's her. Jake looked up from his drill, who Lila unfolded the newspaper with the urgency of a child delivering the gospel. The front page bore the photo of a poised, elegant woman stepping out of a black SUV surrounded by press. The headline read, "Evelyn Carter returns after mysterious absence." Carter Global CEO breaks silence. Jake froze. He didn't need to read the article. He didn't need to look at the byline or read the interview quote beneath the photo. He didn't even need to see the face clearly. He already knew. He'd known from the night she opened her eyes in his arms. He just didn't want it to be true. Eva Evelyn stood on the porch, watching as Lila handed Jake the paper. Her expression was unreadable, hands clasped tightly behind her back. "I guess I don't need to explain," she said softly. Jake slowly set down his tools. "No, you don't." But silence, it turned out, was heavier than truth. "I wasn't hiding it to trick you," she added. I wanted one place in the world where I wasn't a headline, where I could breathe." Jake stared at the photo. "You're the CEO of Carter Global." "I was," she said. "I stepped back. I needed space. The world I lived in, it stopped feeling like my own." Jake looked up, eyes sharp. "So you used a fake name, came to a town where no one knew you, hired a guy who couldn't Google past page 1. Let my daughter open up to you." "Jake, was any of this real?" The words weren't angry. They weren't even cold. They were something worse, quiet, measured, full of the kind of disappointment that had nothing to do with the headlines and everything to do with trust. Eva took a step closer. Every part of it was real. "You, Lila, this garage, this is the first thing in years that's felt real to me. I didn't know how to tell you because I didn't want to lose it. You still lied," he said, voice rough. "You let us believe you were someone else. I didn't mean to deceive you. I just didn't want who I was to matter." Jake shook his head, jaw clenched. "It always matters, especially when people are choosing whether to let you into their lives." A long silence settled between them. The mural loomed behind her, a bright, beautiful lie, or maybe a truth she had no idea how to live yet. Eva looked down. "I'll go, if that's what you want." Jake hesitated. He thought about the laughter, the mural, the way she'd held Lila's hand without even thinking. He thought about the morning coffees, the quiet afternoons, the ache in his chest that had started to feel alive, and yet he couldn't stop the voice in his head. "You're just a footnote in her runaway story, a detour, a break before she goes back to her real life." "Maybe that's for the best," he said finally. Eva flinched as if slapped. "Right," she whispered and turned away. Jake didn't stop her. He didn't look back. But deep in his chest, something small and soft began to tear. That evening, Lila wouldn't speak to him at dinner. She pushed her macaroni around on the plate, arms crossed. "Sweetheart," Jake said gently, "you know I had to." "No, you didn't." Jake leaned forward. "She didn't tell us who she was, Lila. She didn't lie." Lila shot back. "She just wanted to be normal." "You always say that's what you want too." Jake sighed, raking a hand through his hair. "It's not that simple." "Maybe it is," Lila said, her voice quiet now. "You liked her. I know you did. And she made me feel like I wasn't just a kid with a single dad and a sad story." Jake looked down at his plate. The silence between them was suddenly enormous. That night, after Lila went to bed, Jake stood in the garage alone. The mural was nearly finished, but it felt incomplete now. Hollow. A shell of something once beautiful. He walked to his toolbox, pulled open the top drawer, and stared at the velvet pouch. The gold watch still gleamed. He turned it over and reread the engraving, "To E. Love, always Mom." It was never a mistake. She had meant to leave it with him that night, and that somehow made everything worse, because it meant she had trusted him right from the beginning, even when she had nothing left, even when she didn't know if he'd ever find out. Jake let out a long breath and whispered, "What have I done?" In her hotel suite in Denver, Evelyn sat alone on the balcony wrapped in a blanket, eyes unfocused, as city lights blinked below her. The press had their story. The board had what they wanted. Carter Global would keep moving with or without her, but none of it mattered. She reached for her phone, scrolled through the photos. One caught her breath, a blurry shot of the mural, Lila mid-laugh, Jake's arm slung around her protectively. She stared at it for a long time before setting the phone down. She didn't know if Jake would forgive her, but she knew one thing. She couldn't go back to who she was before. Not now, not after him, not after them. And tomorrow, no matter how much it hurt, she would begin to make it right. The mornings felt different without her. Jake woke to the same sun pouring through the kitchen window, the same hiss from the old coffee pot, the same quiet shuffle of Lila feeding the dog. But the house felt emptier than it had in years, not louder, not colder, just hollow. Eva was gone, and in her absence, every detail became an echo. Her mug still sat on the garage workbench, a faint lipstick stain on the rim. Her gloves, borrowed during a cold morning, were still folded neatly in the passenger seat of his truck. Lila's sketchbook remained open on the dining table, mid-drawing a tree with 3 initials in the roots. Jake closed it gently. He'd told himself it was for the best, that people like her didn't stay, that maybe none of it was real. But now that she was gone, none of that logic brought him any peace. Lila had grown quiet too. That morning as Jake drove her to school, she stared out the window, chin resting on her hand. The sun glinted off the horizon, but her mood didn't lift. "She's not coming back, is she?" she asked suddenly. Jake gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I don't know." She didn't mean to lie. "I know." Silence. Then Lila added, "You hurt her." Jake glanced over, caught in the softness of her accusation. "I think I hurt both of us." They didn't speak for the rest of the drive. Back at the house, Jake stood in front of the garage. The mural stared back at him like a memory that hadn't quite happened. The tree, the roots, the little hidden symbols, they weren't just art. They were pieces of something that had almost grown into a life. And now they were frozen in place. A story abandoned mid-sentence. He picked up his hammer. For a moment he considered covering it all, painting over the wall, erasing the color, burying the truth. But his hand didn't move. Because it had been real, every second, and no amount of denial would change that. That afternoon, Jake tried to keep busy. He fixed a neighbor's riding mower, delivered spare parts to the local mechanic, helped the elderly woman 2 doors down change a flat tire in her driveway. But his mind drifted over and over to the hotel she must have gone to her office in Denver, to the words he should have said and the kindness he should have returned. He remembered what she told him. Sometimes things need time, not tools. He'd responded like a builder. But maybe she'd spoken as someone asking for healing, and he hadn't heard her. That night, he opened the drawer again. The velvet pouch was still there. He unwrapped it slowly, holding the gold watch in his palm, then ran his thumb over the engraving, "To E Love, Always Mom." He remembered her telling him how her mother used to paint stories on the walls. This watch hadn't been a tip. It had been a thread she'd left, hoping he might follow it. In Denver, Evelyn sat in the boardroom surrounded by voices and spreadsheets and proposals. Men in ties spoke in percentages. Women in heels clicked down the hallway with urgency. Her name appeared in headlines again. CEO resurfaces after break. Market reacts. Favorably, but none of it touched her. She sat at the head of the table, staring out the glass wall, at the city lights, feeling nothing but weight. A week ago, she'd been in a small garage, hands stained with paint, laughing over grilled cheese and galaxy bears. And she had felt real. Now she felt like a ghost in her own life. Her assistant knocked gently. "Ms. Carter, you have a video message waiting from a school administrator in Maple Ridge." Evelyn turned surprised. "Maple Ridge?" "Yes. She said it's about a student, Lila Holloway. She didn't leave a message but asked you to call back if you have a moment." Evelyn's heart caught. She didn't hesitate. Back in Maple Ridge, Jake walked into Lila's room to check on her. She was under the blanket with a flashlight reading an old book Eva had left behind, The Secret Garden. "She used to love that one," Jake said quietly. Lila looked up. "Did she say that?" Jake nodded. "Told me her mother read it to her when she was little. Every spring." Lila pulled back the blanket. "Dad, if someone says sorry, even if it's late, is it okay to forgive them?" Jake sat on the edge of the bed. "Sometimes the best kind of forgiveness is the one that surprises even you." Lila blinked. "So, would it be okay if I told her I forgive her?" Jake smiled, touched her hair. "I think she'd be lucky to hear it." That night, Jake stood on the porch, coffee in hand, staring up at the stars. The sky was unusually clear, the kind of clarity that didn't offer answers, but gave you space to ask better questions. He didn't hear the car at first, didn't register the soft purr of an engine or the crunch of tires on gravel. But then a door shut, and footsteps. He turned slowly. She was standing at the edge of the driveway, coat buttoned, hair loose, eyes tired, but burning with something he couldn't name. Eva. No headlines, no entourage, no pretense. Just her. Jake stepped down the porch steps. The distance between them was only a few feet, but it had felt like miles for days. "I shouldn't have left like that," she said quietly. "I shouldn't have let you," he replied. They stood there, snow beginning to fall again, gentle and slow, the world holding its breath. "I came back," she whispered, "because you were the only place I didn't feel lost." Jake took a step closer. "I thought I needed honesty. Turns out, I needed you." Her eyes welled, but she didn't blink. "Still think this garage is worth fixing?" she asked, half a smile curling her lip. Jake reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the gold watch. "I think we both are." And then, in the soft hush of falling snow, something finally healed. The next morning, the air was crisp and still, and the frost clung stubbornly to the edges of the garage roof. Jake stepped out with a fresh mug of coffee and found Eva already there, kneeling beside Lila in front of the mural. The two were laughing softly as Lila carefully painted a tiny red cardinal into the tree's topmost branch. The sound of their laughter, gentle, unforced, was a balm Jake hadn't realized he needed. It was as if the last few days, with all their confusion and silence, had melted into something simpler, more honest. He stood quietly watching them, unsure whether to interrupt. Lila spotted him first. "Dad, look, the bird's almost done," Eva said. "Cardinals mean people you miss are still watching you." Jake nodded, his eyes never leaving Eva. "Sounds about right." Eva looked up at him, her expression unreadable, but this time there was no need to read between the lines. She was here, present, solid. After breakfast, Jake pulled her aside just behind the garage where the ivy crept along the fence. He reached into the pocket of his worn flannel shirt and handed her a small folded envelope. No name on it, just a soft crease where he'd opened and closed it a dozen times. Eva opened it carefully. Inside was a copy of a letter, handwritten on the school district's letterhead. A note from Lila's principal thanking the anonymous donor who had quietly paid for not only Lila's school supplies and lunch program, but also several after-school scholarships for students from single-parent homes. Eva didn't speak. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the paper. Jake met her gaze. "I wasn't supposed to know, but I found out. Mrs. Penner thought it was me." Eva's voice was barely a whisper. "I just wanted to help. I didn't want you to feel obligated." Jake gave a slow nod. "You didn't do it for me. You did it for her. For the kids." Eva swallowed hard. "After my mom died, I kept asking myself what I could have done better. And I think maybe the answer is just to start doing better somewhere. Anywhere. That was my start." Jake reached for her hand. "Then you're already miles ahead of most." That afternoon, Eva joined him on a run to town, just errands, but it felt like something more. They moved easily together, Jake buying bolts and roof sealant, Eva chatting with the hardware clerk about weatherproofing techniques. They grabbed lunch from the deli on Main and shared sandwiches in the truck parked under an old elm tree. "Funny," Eva said, brushing crumbs from her lap, "I used to think quiet was something to avoid. In my world, if there wasn't noise, meetings, emails, strategies, I felt like I was doing something wrong." Jake chuckled. "Around here, quiet just means things are working the way they should. I think I'm finally learning that." She turned to look at him fully. "Jake, do you ever think about what comes next?" He hesitated. "You mean after the garage, or after the miracle of you showing back up? Maybe both." Jake leaned back in his seat, considering. "I think about it more than I let on. Lila's growing up fast. I want her to see that life's not just about fixing things that break. It's about building things that last. And you've started something here, Eva, whether you planned to or not." She was quiet for a moment, then softly, "So have you." That evening, back at the house, Jake found Lila sitting on the porch swing, holding a card she'd made from folded construction paper and glitter glue. On the front, a heart-shaped tree with 3 initials, L, J, and E, just like in the mural. "She's not like the other grown-ups," Lila said, eyes serious. "No," Jake replied, sitting beside her. "She's not. Do you think she'll stay, Jake?" Thought about it, about all the ways she could leave. The boardrooms, the press, the skyline that once belonged to her, and all the reasons she might choose not to. I think he said slowly that the people who matter most don't always come when you expect them, but they show up, and if you're lucky, they stay long enough for you to become better because of them. Lila nodded. Then I hope she stays forever. Jake smiled and kissed the top of her head. Me too, kiddo. Later that night, Jake stepped into the garage alone. The tools were put away, the walls freshly painted, and the scent of sawdust was slowly giving way to something warmer, like home. On the wall just beneath the mural, he'd added something. A small wooden plaque, handmade sanded, smooth, the lettering burned in by hand, restored with care, with hope, with love. He wasn't sure if it was a dedication, a memory, or a promise. But it was true. Eva joined him minutes later, holding 2 mugs of tea. Lila's asleep, she said. Took her 10 minutes. She said, Galaxy bears protect good dreams. Jake chuckled. That sounds about right. They stood together staring at the mural. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Eva said, I don't want to leave again. Jake turned to her. Then don't. I mean it. I want to build something real. Here, with you, with her. Jake's voice was quiet but steady. You already have. And then no grand speeches, no declarations. They just stood there shoulder to shoulder, watching the painted roots on the wall spread deep into something far bigger than either of them. Not just a mural, not just a second chance, but the beginning of something that might just last forever. By early April, the snow had given way to soft rains and muddy boots. Wildflowers started peeking out along the fence lines, and the garage no longer looked like a forgotten relic of someone else's past. It looked like something lived in, cared for. So did Jake. He stood one morning on the porch with his coffee in hand, watching Eva and Lila in the driveway, their hair still damp from the drizzle. They were fitting an old wooden bench with new slats, giggling, as Lila insisted one of them had to carve their names into the side once it was done. Like pioneers, she said proudly. Eva caught Jake's eyes and smiled. He smiled back, slower, deeper, the kind of smile that said, this feels real now. Inside the garage, a new shelving system had gone up. Eva had insisted on it. No offense, but chaos with charm is still chaos, she'd told Jake, teasing. He let her organize the tools labeled drawers and even rewire the lighting with the help of a retired electrician she'd met at the farmer's market. Retired doesn't mean useless, the man had joked. It just means I finally get to choose the projects that matter. Jake found himself repeating that line days later while sitting on the back step, Eva beside him, Lila playing hopscotch in the driveway. He wasn't sure when exactly the 3 of them had begun moving as one unit, but now that they did, everything else seemed quieter, steadier, and yet there were still decisions to make. One afternoon, Jake got a call from an old friend, Riley, a shop manager in Boulder. I've got an opening, Riley said. Full-time benefits, good pay. I need someone I can trust. You'd be a perfect fit. Jake looked over at the garage, the house, and the faint outline of Eva's silhouette behind the window. I'll think about it, he replied, but the thought wouldn't leave him. That night, after Lila had gone to bed, and the house had settled into the creaks and sighs of old wood and quiet peace, Jake found Eva sitting in the garage, barefoot, staring at the mural like it might change. She looked up when he entered. You okay? He sat beside her on the bench. Riley offered me a job in Boulder. She turned to face him. A good one. Very. It's stable, solid. Would mean better schools for Lila. More certainty. Eva hesitated. Do you want to take it? I don't know, he said honestly. I've spent years making decisions based on survival. This would be the first one I've made thinking about the future, about living, not just getting by. They sat in silence for a moment. Then she said, when I first came here, I thought this would just be a layover. A pause before life restarted. But now, I wonder if the life I wanted all along started right here. Jake looked at her, the warmth in his eyes, quiet but unmistakable. So, what do we do? We build, she said softly. Whatever that means, whatever that looks like. 2 days later, Eva showed Jake a folder. What's this? He asked. A transfer of ownership, she replied. The garage. It's yours. Jake stared at the paperwork. His name was at the top, signed, notarized, legally, airtight. I can't take this, he said. You already did, she said gently. When you showed me what integrity looks like. When you didn't ask for anything, but gave everything anyway. This is yours, Jake. Not because you need it, but because you deserve it. Jake blinked back the sting in his eyes. How did you know this is what I needed? Because I once needed it too, she whispered. And someone believed in me before I believed in myself. He reached out, squeezed her hand. Then let's make this place something more. Something for people like us. She nodded. That's the plan. That weekend, they put up a new sign over the garage entrance. Not flashy, not commercial, just carved wood, hand-painted by Lila Holloway and Hope Repairs Restoration's Second Chances. It didn't need to say more. The town noticed. Neighbors came by with questions. A woman asked if Jake could help fix up her late husband's motorcycle. A young teen asked if he could intern for the summer to learn the trade. An elderly man dropped off a toaster just for the company. Ava watched it unfold from the porch hands, tucked into her sleeves, heart fuller than it had been in years. Later that evening, as they closed the garage and locked the tools away, Lila ran to Ava and asked, "Can I tell people you're staying for good now?" Ava looked down at her, then at Jake. "You can tell them I've found good, and I'm not letting it go." Jake scooped Lila up and spun her in a circle. "Guess we're officially open for business." Lila giggled. Even galaxy bears need tune-ups sometimes. Jake and Eva laughed, their laughter echoing into the dusk. That night, as twilight deepened and stars scattered across the sky, Jake stood on the porch with Eva, shoulder to shoulder. The garage behind them glowed with soft golden light. He turned to her. "You know," he said, "I never asked, what made you collapse that night on the road?" Ava didn't look away. "I ran myself empty. I was trying to prove something to everyone, trying to be someone perfect. I lost myself. And now I'm remembering who I really was, before all that. And maybe who I could be with the right people beside me." Jake nodded. "Then I'm glad I was driving by." She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "So am I." And beneath the quiet night sky, beneath the tree, with initials in its roots beneath the roof, they rebuilt together. Something strong had taken hold, something earned, something worth holding on to. It was a Thursday afternoon when Jake found the envelope. He hadn't been expecting mail, certainly not mail addressed in handwriting, so elegant it didn't look like it belonged in a town this small. The return address was from a legal office in Denver. He opened it standing at the workbench in the garage, his hands still streaked with grease and his shirt dusted with sawdust. Inside was a letter, a formal one, deed transfer, property rights, new business classification. And at the very bottom, effective immediately, the entire property known as the Holloway Garage and Lot is now under full ownership of Jacob Thomas Holloway. No payment required, no loan to repay, no strings. Jake read it twice, then once more. The garage, the land, everything was his. He looked around, suddenly struck by the quiet hum of the place. The mural on the far wall, the new shelves, the scent of pine and oil. The life that had been built slowly, one act of kindness at a time. Ava. She had done this, without ceremony, without a grand gesture, just a quiet act of faith. He drove to the cottage immediately, barely remembering to wipe his hands. Ava answered the door in her paint-splattered sweater hair, pulled back bare feet. "Everything okay?" Jake didn't speak right away. He held up the letter. She glanced at it, then met his eyes. "You did this," he said. "I didn't do it for you," she replied gently. "I did it because it was already yours. You just hadn't signed the paper yet." Jake stepped into the doorway, heart pounding. "You could have waited. Told me. Made it into a moment." She smiled softly. Not everything good needs a spotlight. Jake folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. "You keep catching me off guard." "You've been catching people your whole life," she said, stepping closer. "Someone needed to catch you for once." That night, Jake found himself pacing the porch after Lila went to bed, the letter still in his pocket, heavy in a way that had nothing to do with ink or paper. He had known grief. He had known loss. He had known what it felt like to rebuild from nothing. But now, he was starting to know grace. He wasn't sure what to do with that. Wasn't sure he deserved it. The door creaked open behind him. Eva stepped out with 2 mugs of cocoa. Not tea, not coffee. "Felt like something sweet tonight," she said, offering one with both hands. Jake took it, nodding. You're full of surprises." She sat beside him on the porch swing, the old wood creaking gently under their weight. "Do you ever wonder what your wife would think of all this?" Jake blinked. He hadn't expected that. "I think about her every day," he said. "Sometimes it's a memory. Sometimes it's just silence." Eva was quiet. Jake went on slowly. "She'd want me to keep living. She was never the jealous type. She had this way of seeing the good in people before they could see it in themselves. Then I think she'd be proud of you," Eva said. "Of what you've built. Of Lila." Jake nodded, eyes stinging. "I like to think so. And she'd want you to be happy again." Jake turned toward her, something opening in his chest he hadn't let breathe in years. "I think I'm getting there." The next morning, Jake walked to town with a purpose. He stopped by the hardware store, then the town clerk's office. He made a few quiet inquiries, signed a few papers. The man at the counter raised a brow. "New business name." Jake nodded. It's time it reflected what we're really doing. He left with a folder under his arm, a weight lifted from his shoulders. At the garage that afternoon, Eva was sanding a weathered bench when Jake returned. He handed her the folder with a grin. "What's this? Just read it." She opened it slowly. Inside, the official new name of the business, Holloway & Carter Restoration Works, specializing in more than repairs. Eva stared at it, then looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. "You put my name on it." Jake nodded. "Because you've rebuilt just as much as I have." She stepped forward, hesitant at first. "Jake, are you sure I'm sure of this?" he said, a voice steady. "This place isn't just mine anymore. It's ours. What you did for Lila, for me, for this town, you changed something here. Something in me." Eva reached for his hand. "You changed me too." Their fingers interlaced. That evening, the three of them sat outside, watching the sunset bleed into lavender clouds. Lila was curled up on the porch, with a book, Jake and Eva wrapped in a shared blanket. There were no headlines, no speeches, no photographers or boardrooms. Just a mechanic, a woman who had once been a runaway CEO, and a girl who painted galaxies in her notebook. 3 people, 1 home, and the kind of love that didn't need to be loud to be lasting. Later, as the stars came out, Jake whispered almost to himself, "I keep thinking about the night I found you. You were barely breathing. And now," Eva leaned her head on his shoulder, "now we're both breathing easier." He smiled. "I didn't know CPR would lead to all this." Eva grinned. "Maybe that's the thing about saving someone, you never know which one of you is actually being saved." And beneath the hum of summer's early promise, they held each other close, no longer running, no longer repairing, but building something whole. The grand opening wasn't grand by any typical standard. There were no red ribbons, no stage lights, no brass bands. Just a handmade banner strung between 2 poles, Holloway & Carter Restoration Works, come as you are. The parking lot was full by noon. Word had spread quickly around town. People didn't just come for repairs. They came to witness what the place stood for: second chances, quiet kindness, and the rare warmth of people who meant what they said. There were old couples holding hands, teenagers in dusty baseball caps, and single moms balancing toddlers on their hips. The community showed up not out of obligation, but because they knew this wasn't about business. It was about belonging. Jake stood near the front with Lila on one side and Eva on the other, a paper cup of lemonade in his hand, nerves buzzing under his skin. He wasn't used to attention. He wasn't used to being the reason people gathered. But today, he wasn't just a guy with a wrench. He was something more, something rooted. Eva squeezed his hand gently. "You look like you're about to bolt." He chuckled. "I might, if I thought I had anywhere else to be." She leaned close, just enough for him to feel the smile in her voice. "You don't. This is yours." He looked around at the laughter, the mural, the half-eaten pie on the folding table, the father and son crouched over an antique radio, asking if it could be saved. "This is ours," Jake said. A few hours later, after most of the crowd had gone, a tall man in a pressed navy suit stepped out of a silver sedan parked across the street. His gait was polished posture, rigid, every detail in place, except his face, which showed a flicker of something neither cold nor warm: recognition. Jake was standing near the mural, helping a young girl refill her paintbrush water, when the man approached. Eva was just exiting the garage, wiping her hands on a rag. She froze. The man smiled stiffly. Evelyn. Jake felt Eva's hand slip from his slowly. "Hello, Victor," she said quietly. Jake didn't like the way Victor looked at her, like he knew her story better than she did, like he expected her to fall back into the mold she'd broken. "I saw the article," Victor said. "You've certainly made a splash down here." "It's not a splash," Eva replied evenly. "It's a life." Victor gave a short, dry laugh. "You walked away from Carter Global, from everything, and now you're what, running a garage?" Jake stepped forward, calm but grounded. "She's not running it." "We are." Victor gave him a once-over. "And you must be the mechanic." Jake nodded, among other things. Eva took a small step forward. "Why are you here, Victor? Because the board wants you back." "Because this," he gestured at the modest building, the kids running around the mismatched folding chairs, "is not the Evelyn Carter we know." "No," Eva said, her voice steady. "It's not. It's the one I've become, the one I like." Victor's brow furrowed. "You're throwing away your legacy." She shook her head. "No, I'm rewriting it." Victor's face hardened. "The company's not going to wait forever." Eva offered a quiet smile. "It doesn't have to. I'm exactly where I belong." He opened his mouth to respond, then seemed to think better of it. With a curt nod, he turned and walked back toward the car. Jake watched him go, then turned to Eva. "You okay?" She nodded slowly, eyes still on the fading car. That was the last echo. "I've been carrying that weight for too long." Jake tilted his head. "And now," she looked at him, "now I'm free." That evening, the garage was quiet again. The banner flapped lazily in the breeze. Empty pie tins littered the back table. Lila was fast asleep on the porch swing, a smear of frosting on her cheek. Jake and Eva sat beneath the mural, sharing the last slice of apple pie from a paper plate. The stars were out, and the town had returned to its usual hum. He looked over at her, seeing her not as the woman he'd rescued on a snowy night, or the CEO who disappeared, or the mystery with secrets. He saw her as the person she was now, present, grounded, luminous, in a way no photograph could ever capture. "I thought I was just a pit stop," Jake said quietly. "A detour on your way back to power." "You were never a detour," she whispered. "You were the place I was trying to find all along." They sat in the soft silence that followed one that didn't need to be filled. The next morning, a small article appeared in a Denver Business Digest. Carter Global finalizes leadership restructuring. Former CEO Evelyn Carter declines return. Focuses on community-based ventures in Colorado. No photo, no scandal, just a short note, easy to miss. But for those who knew the full story, it said everything. Later that week, Lila stood in front of her class with a handmade poster titled, "What Home Means to Me." She pointed to a drawing of the garage, the mural, and the three of them beneath the painted tree. "Home," she said, "is where you get to start again, and where people choose you every single day." The room was quiet. Then came the applause. Back at the garage, Jake was under the hood of an old Buick when Eva approached with 2 iced coffees and a grin. "Lila's teacher called," she said. Apparently, her speech made 3 parents cry. Jake grinned. "That's my girl." Eva handed him a coffee. "She wants to help paint another mural. On the inside this time. Something about stars and gears and emotional torque." Jake laughed. "I have no idea what that means." Eva smiled. "Neither do I, but I think it's going to be beautiful." They clinked coffee cups, then went back to work side by side, hearts lighter than they'd ever been. And for the first time in both their lives, they weren't rebuilding what had been lost. They were building what they had found. Rain returned the next morning, not the bitter kind that came with winter, but a spring rain, soft and steady, draping the town in silver threads. The garage stood quiet, doors closed for once, the sign swaying gently in the breeze above Holloway and Carter, repairs, restorations, second chances. Jake stood inside at the workbench, staring at a carburetor he wasn't fixing. The radio played low, some old blues tune Lila had recently decided was real music, but his hands were still. Across the room, Eva packed up a donation box for the town's new family shelter. Lila had outgrown half her wardrobe, and Eva had quietly started organizing donations from others too. She didn't brag, she just did. Jake watched her, more than the rain, more than the broken tools, more than the clatter of the old fan overhead. She caught him staring and gave him a questioning glance. Something wrong with the carburetor. Probably nothing compared to what's going right, he murmured. Eva tilted her head. That's either really sweet or very concerning coming from a mechanic. Jake smiled, but it faded quickly. I've been thinking. Oh boy, I got a call this morning, he said. From Boulder. Eva's hands paused on the cardboard flap. Riley again. He nodded. Same offer, same steady paycheck, good benefits. A shop with 4 bays and a lift that doesn't creak like an old man's knees. Eva tried to keep her voice even. And I told him I'd think about it. Again. She nodded slowly. It's a good opportunity. Yeah, it is. He walked over, wiped his hands on a rag, and leaned against the table across from her. But he added, so is this. She looked up at him, guarded. You don't owe me anything, Jake. Don't stay for the wrong reasons. He stepped closer, voice low, sure. I'm not staying out of guilt. I'm staying because for the first time in a long time, I'm not fixing someone else's mess. I'm building something that matters. And not just the garage. Eva's eyes shimmered, but she blinked it back. I don't want you to regret choosing me over your own future. Jake reached for her hand. You are my future. You and Lila. This town. This work. This life. It's not a fallback. It's the path. And I know that now. She looked down at their hands, then back at him. Then let's build it. All of it. He leaned in and kissed her slow and quiet, like a promise that didn't need grand words. Just presence. Just truth. And in that kiss was everything they'd both lost and everything they were daring to begin. That afternoon, a surprise visitor arrived, a woman in a tailored blazer and rain boots, carrying a camera bag and a wide smile. Don't worry, she said, stepping into the garage. I'm not with the press. I'm with Community Roots magazine. We do profiles on small-town revival stories. Heard about your grand opening. Jake raised an eyebrow. We didn't send out press. She grinned. You didn't need to. Someone sent us a photo of your mural with a note that read, sometimes restoration begins with people, not machines. Eva shot a look at Lila, who was trying very hard to look innocent, as she adjusted the scarf on the bench she'd just styled like a display. The reporter interviewed them for nearly an hour, photographing the mural, the plaque, the workspaces. When she asked Jake what made this garage special, he answered without hesitation. It's not about the parts we fix. It's about the people we see. We give each other permission to be whole. She paused, her note-taking visibly moved. You'll be in next month's issue. People need stories like this. Eva smiled softly. So do we. Later that week, Eva drove out to the town clerk's office alone. The receptionist, a woman named Margie, with a teacup always in hand, looked up with surprise. Well, hello, Miss Carter. Just Eva now, she said. I'd like to file paperwork for a new nonprofit. Margie blinked. Oh, it's a community foundation to support working families, single parents, small business apprenticeships, housing grants. Margie set down her tea. That's a big mission. Eva nodded. So is healing. But it starts small. Margie smiled and pulled out the forms. What are you calling it? Eva hesitated for a moment, then said, the Lila Foundation. On Saturday, the garage held its first free workshop for teens, basic maintenance, and self-reliance. 10 kids showed up. Jake showed them how to change a tire, check oil levels, and sharpen a sense of pride in their own hands. Eva stood in the back arms, folded beaming, as Jake made engines sound like poetry. At the end, one boy lingered behind. You really think I could be a mechanic one day? He asked. Jake crouched to eye level. I think you already are. You just haven't gotten your hands dirty enough yet. The boy grinned and nodded, then ran off to catch his ride. Eva joined Jake as he cleaned up. You keep saving people. Jake looked at her. You keep giving them something to come back to. That night, as the rain returned, Jake stood on the porch with Eva and Lila. The town was quiet again. The sign swung above. The mural glistened slightly under the damp. Lila tugged Eva's sleeve. Do you think we'll always live here? Eva knelt beside her. I think home is wherever people choose to love you. Lila nodded, thoughtful. Then we're already home. Jake wrapped an arm around both of them. The rain softened, the wind stilled, and in the silence that followed, a deep and certain peace settled in. Not the end of something, but the near beginning of everything that finally made sense. Together, at last. The summer sun rose slow and golden over Maple Ridge, casting warm light across the garage roof and painting soft shadows through the cottonwoods that lined the gravel road. It was the kind of morning that didn't ask for anything. It simply arrived calm and complete. Inside the garage, the air hummed with life. Jake was tightening the final bolt on a vintage Harley, while Lila sat cross-legged nearby, narrating her how-to sketchbook aloud as she drew each step with colored pencils. Eva stood at the front desk, organizing registration forms for the Foundation's next apprenticeship cycle. 3 new teens were joining next week. A year ago, none of this existed. No workshop, no laughter echoing through the rafters. No names etched into wood and paint and memory. But now it was alive, earned, rooted. That afternoon, the town gathered at the community field for the official opening of the Carter Holloway Commons, a green space rebuilt from an abandoned lot behind the post office. The playground equipment gleamed, the walking trails curved along flower beds and shaded benches, and a small amphitheater stood at the edge, ready for school plays, outdoor movies, and voices that needed space to grow. At the center stood a sculpture carved from reclaimed metal, twisting into the shape of a tree with branches stretched upward, and 3 initials welded discreetly into the roots, LJE. No plaque, no speech, just quiet meaning. Jake stood with Eva and Lila at the edge of the crowd arms, around both of them. People passed by, offering thanks, hugs, handshakes. A retired teacher wiped tears from her cheeks. A teenager snapped a selfie beside the sculpture and whispered, "This place saved me." Eva leaned into Jake's side. "I still wake up some days expecting it all to disappear." He kissed her temple. "I used to think good things were temporary, but now I think they just take time to grow." She nodded. "And the right people." Lila tugged on Jake's hand. "Can I go get lemonade with Maisie?" "Go ahead, sweet pea. Stay where I can see you." Lila ran off, laughing barefoot in the grass. Jake watched her go, then glanced at Eva. "She's blossomed here. She always had it in her," Eva said. "She just needed a little peace to grow into it." "So did I," Jake said softly. Eva turned to him, hand slipping into his. "So did I." That evening, the town's first story night was held at the garage. The old bay doors were rolled open benches, and blankets scattered across the floor, string lights glowing above. Neighbors brought folding chairs, casseroles, lemonade, and memories. Kids ran barefoot under the mural, and Lila read the first story, a tale about a galaxy bear, of course. Then came a quiet moment. Jake stepped up, not because he planned to speak, but because the moment asked him to. He stood in front of the mural with one hand on the heart-shaped tree and the initials inside. "I don't have a prepared story," he began, his voice carrying in the hush. "But I have a truth." Eyes turned to him, some smiling, some misty. "There was a time I thought I was just meant to fix things that were broken. Engines, furniture, my life. I thought if I kept my head down, worked hard, and stayed out of the way, maybe nothing else would fall apart." He looked toward Eva, who watched him not with pride, but with love. "But then someone came into my life who didn't need to be fixed. She just needed to be seen. And when I saw her, really saw her, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe in a long time." He paused. The room waited. That maybe I could be part of something not broken. Maybe I could be part of something whole, something healing. He turned to Lila. "My daughter taught me to hope. Eva taught me to stay." He exhaled. "And this garage, this town, taught me that restoration isn't about going back. It's about moving forward together." Silence, then applause. And with it came that unnameable feeling, the one that wrapped around the room like a warm quilt. The one that said, "We're not alone anymore." Later that night, long after the crowd had dispersed and the laughter faded into memory, Jake sat on the porch with Eva and Lila, wrapped in a blanket under the stars. Fireflies blinked across the yard like nature's applause. A soft breeze rustled the leaves overhead. "I think this was the best day ever," Lila murmured sleepily, head resting on Eva's lap. Eva brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "I think I agree." Jake held them both with one arm, his heart full, in a way he never thought possible again. "You know, that night I found you on the road. I thought I was saving a stranger. But the truth is," Eva looked up at him, waiting, "you saved me right back." She smiled, eyes glistening. Then maybe we both got a miracle. He kissed her softly as Lila drifted to sleep. And as the stars shimmered overhead and the mural glowed faintly in the distance, the quiet truth of their journey settled in. Some love stories don't begin with grand gestures or perfect timing. Some begin in the snow with a heartbeat returning, and end under the stars with three people who finally found home, not because they were looking for it, but because they were willing to build it together. We'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what part of the story touched you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Your words mean the world to us. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another heartfelt story like this one. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this growing community. Until next time, take care, stay kind, and keep believing in second chances.